Detroit, Michigan used to be the fifth largest city in the United States. Tuesday, it became the largest city in U.S. history to go into bankruptcy. The ruling by a federal judge to allow the bankruptcy marks a watershed in the history of Detroit, once the cradle of the U.S. auto industry, now a symbol of urban decay and mismanagement. Detroit's state-appointed emergency manager had painted bankruptcy as Detroit's best bet for a return to financial stability, and the judge's ruling will now give Kevin Orr, the city manager, and other civic leaders an opportunity to test that argument.
Let me just say that the judge has spoken, and I do think it's a tough day for all of us here in Detroit. I believe since I came to office, with the crisis that we had, this was inevitable. I don't think anybody necessarily wanted to go in this direction, but now that we're here, it's more important that we work together as opposed to continuing to fight each other.
While we are very pleased, we remain very concerned about the need to adjust the city's debt, to improve its level of services for its citizens, and to also prepare for the city to exit this receivership in a fashion that restores democracy to the city.
Bill Brandt is with us on the phone to explain the latest chapter in the city's financial crisis. He is the president and CEO of Development Specialists Incorporated. Bill, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Debbie. Good to talk to you.
Thank you. Michigan Governor Rick Snyder characterized Judge Rhodes' decision as a, quote, call to action. I wonder if that's how you see it, or is his ruling the voice of doom?
You know, I don't think his ruling is the voice of doom. I think, as I said to your listeners on a TV show at your studios not too long ago, it's tough to get into a Chapter 9. You have to petition to do so and be found eligible by the judge. And that's all that's happened here so far. You might say, if you were playing a video game, that it's now game on. And now we're going to see what happens if the issues in Detroit are confined to the bankruptcy court, and the warring parties basically have to look to the bankruptcy court as the referee for their various arguments.
And what does this mean, this bankruptcy moving forward? What does it mean specifically? Will, for instance, essential services be cut? And we will talk about the pension in just a second, but in very practical day-to-day ways, what does it mean?
Almost nothing. I realize I sound like a Pollyanna when I say that, but I think that the services and other issues in Detroit have been cut about as far as you can humanly cut them. There are intervening sources of cash and tax revenue and loans that the emergency manager and the others in the city city fathers are taking to basically establish and maintain essential city services. Now, I don't look for a big change in that. I think, if anything, all we're going to see, as you mentioned, Debbie, is discussions about pensions and bonds. Now, with respect to that, it is going to be a very interesting issue to see how Detroit can currently borrow more money in the bond market as cities normally do. That's going to be a bit restrictive for a while. So, if anything, the city's going to have to live within its budget. But it's pretty much doing that right now. It's not a great deliverer of services as it is, but I don't expect they're going to get much worse than they are.
Now, part of what was so controversial about Judge Rhodes' ruling, particularly with union workers and the managers of the pension fund, was that the pension benefits weren't obligated to have heightened protection in the bankruptcy. Of course, those who were fighting to protect the pension would say that they have the right to it because of the Michigan Constitution. So is this setting up more litigation?
Absolutely. And I like Judge Rhodes. He's a friend of mine. He and I saw each other in Austin, Texas at a seminar about a week ago and chatted about this, not per se the case, but the larger issues. I think Judge Rhodes would be the first to tell you, if you caught him in a candid moment, that he absolutely does not expect to be the last word on the issue of whether or not the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution basically can obviate a number of state constitutional guarantees as to pension sacrosanctness. I think, Debbie, it would be safe to say, unless there's a negotiated settlement here, and that doesn't seem likely at this point, but I think it would be safe to say that the big guys, the Supremes, will ultimately have to rule on this, and there'll be a lot of states and a lot of cities looking to see how they might rule.
Yeah, and as you're just alluding to, although this seems like a victory for Kevin Orr and those who were fighting for this bankruptcy to go forward, it's not a complete victory for him.
No, I think that Judge Rhodes perhaps didn't have to, and I'm speculating here a bit, but you know me well, Deb. I think Judge Rhodes didn't have to be as emphatic about the pensions as he was. I mean, he could certainly wait to decide that question, but he more or less offered a tentative ruling or an advisory ruling. Now, remember that he's also fostering mediation for both sides. If you're about to go into mediation and Judge Rhodes has just sent a shot across your bow about, that position you thought was sacrosanct, well, it might not be. That might lead to more flexibility and negotiations within the mediation sessions. And if I had to be a betting person, I might bet that Judge Rhodes was sending a message to both sides that perhaps, since you now see over the precipice and how far down it is, you might want to negotiate your way out of this rather than have me impose it. Recognizing, of course, I think both sides do, that if he does impose it, there are certainly going to be challenges all the way up to the Supreme Court.
And you just mentioned just a few minutes ago, Bill, that other cities are watching this, and the judge probably is aware of that. And I'm just wondering if, this is my word, the ginormous financial problems that Detroit is facing. Is it unique to the history and the situation of Detroit, or are there larger lessons here to be learned for other cities who are beleaguered or on the precipice of being beleaguered?
The fair answer to your question, Debbie, is both. The larger lessons to be learned is simply don't put off until tomorrow what you should be paying attention to today. As you pointed out in your introduction, this is a 60-year problem in the making in Detroit, and people haven't faced up to it now, and it's unfortunate that it took this to get them to face it. As to do I expect a raft of Chapter 9s as a result of this? Not at all. In many ways, Detroit, like several of the other cities, and there are only several of them that have filed Chapter 9 around the country, is a very unique set of circumstances. As they would say in the law world, it's sui generis. It's unique unto itself, and I would not expect a whole host of people to pile into bankruptcy court based on Judge Rose's decision. People have asked me today, well, if he does obviate the pensions and say that city can cut pensions, won't that mean other cities like Chicago will jump into bankruptcy court? Debbie, as you've seen, jumping into bankruptcy court entails all kinds of collateral damage beyond just dealing with your labor unions. It severely restricts your access to the bond and credit markets. It ruins the business reputation of the city. So anybody who thinks just because this is a way to deal with your labor unions, if in fact Judge Rose is right, you're going to jump into bankruptcy, is sadly misplaced. This is a unique set of circumstances, and it's got a ways to play out yet even then.
Bill, I'm almost out of time, but what's next?
This is going to take a while. We're now going to have some trench warfare. Both sides are going to negotiate. There'll be a lot of motions in front of Judge Rose, but anybody who expects a quick conclusion to Detroit's bankruptcy, yes, Mr. Orr may present his plan very shortly, but that will be his plan. It requires buy-in by a number of these various constituencies, and at this point, if I can use a word we use in my business, there hasn't been enough foreplay, Debbie. I believe that a lot of people are going to want to sit and argue about this for a while. So I'm one who thinks that this is going to stretch well on into next year.
All right, so I suspect we will talk to you again about this. It is always a great pleasure. Bill Brandt, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deb. See you soon.